Thank you for joining us tonight on the Grio. I am your host, Marc Lamont Hill. Across the country, there are renewed calls and efforts for cities and states to atone for American slavery. In California, the state's Reparations Task Force released a nearly 500-page report this year. It laid out the systematic harm racism has had on Black people for generations. In Kansas City, a pilot program for reparations is moving forward. In Wilmington City, Delaware, local leaders formed a task force to consider reparations. Now, these are all steps in the right direction. There is no price tag or commemoration that can really undo all the disparities that Black people have been subjected to as a result of slavery and its afterlives. But the nation is still divided somehow on if reparations is the correct answer. According to a poll by Pew Research Center, 77% of Black Americans support reparations. That's compared to 18% of white Americans. Not surprising, but still, that's a really big gap. And it has to be because people don't understand why reparations are necessary. At least I'm going to hope that's the reason. Joining me now is Ekemini Uwan. She's a public theologian. She's also the co-author of Truth's Table, Black Women's Musings on Life, Love, and Liberation. Welcome back to the show. Let's talk about that liberation part. In the poll I just talked about, 77% of Black people said reparations are needed. I get the white people part for a moment. How only 77% of us think reparations are needed?
Well, thank you for having me back on, Mark. Well, you know how our cousins do. Here's the thing. We say it all the time that Black people are not a monolith, right? I don't know when we've ever been 100% on anything.
Well, we talking about 1 out of 4 almost. We say almost. That's a lot of people at the cookout to be like, I don't want these reparations.
Well, I am not in the number. I'm absolutely for reparations, which is why I'm here. I think, honestly, sometimes there is not enough political education. To be honest, I think is lacking in some ways with regard to reparations. People not understanding maybe what it is, or not even really understanding our history and why it's necessary, or even having a good working understanding of how systemic racism impacts us, not just sociologically and financially, but mentally, right? And so I think that people have a little bit of a narrow view of what reparations is. And it's just like, give me a check. But it wasn't always the case. We know that.
So talk to me about that, because there's a long history of Black people advocating for reparations. It's looked different ways in different people's kind of imaginations and political calculations.
Sure.
What is the call for reparations? What has it been?
Back in April 1862, President Abraham Lincoln actually gave reparations to white slave owners. And the reason why this happened was that Abraham Lincoln signed a bill called the District of Columbia Emancipation Act, which emancipated enslaved Black people. But it also gave compensation to loyal white slave owners who were taking a hit, right, due to the emancipation of those formerly enslaved Africans. So they were paid up to $300 per emancipated slave.
Wow. So this is $300 is a lot of money in the 1800s. So basically what they said was, this is your business. You've lost not only workers, but you've lost chattel. You've lost. It's like losing a rake or a lawnmower or another instrument, right? Because these aren't people. Right. So we're going to reimburse you just like we would a factory if the factory crashed. It's any other kind of emergency kind of relief for people. We're going to repair the damage done. So the government had the capacity and the vision to say, we're going to reimburse slave owners, but we can't reimburse the enslaved people themselves.
That's right. But African Americans, those freed African Americans, had been demanding since the colonial era, by the way, and they even petitioned, for freedom dues, and they sued their former enslavers for their unpaid labor, right, for years upon years upon years, right, and then they also asked for land to start their lives as free people. here in these yet to be United States of America. And so this is not something new. We're really just carrying forward a tradition that has been, and the work that's been handed down to us from generation to generation, and just working to see it through to the end, even if we don't see it in our lifetime.
And hopefully we will, but you're absolutely right. This is generational work, and you've taken up that work. I mean, recently you were at the United Nations presenting on reparations. Tell me about that.
Yes. So, goodness, that historic convening took a lot of work, a lot of activism, a lot of years of toil to get the UN to establish a permanent forum for people of African descent. And so it was important for us. I'm a charter member of the International Civil Working Group. That helps to hold the UN accountable and to ensure that civil society members, our issues, our pain points are centered by the UN, and to ensure that our justice causes are taken up and remedied. And so there, one of those issues that I wanted to present on that I felt was very important is reparations. And not only just reparations governmentally, but reparations, calling for reparations from the Catholic Church and Protestant Church, but also centering.
Why the church, as opposed to calling for insurance companies or railroads or other people or universities who also have made so much money off the exploited and really stolen labor of African people?
That's right. Yeah. So insurance companies, university, they're all in the mix, right? They're often in that conversation about reparations and in those in some of the frameworks of reparations, but oftentimes churches are left out, and forgotten about. And so I felt that as a public theologian, it's my duty and importance to remind people, like, wait a minute now, the Catholics and the Protestants also had a significant hand in the transatlantic slave trade and chattel slavery.
How much of you're a public theologian?
Yeah.
How much of the framing of the reparations demand do you see as part of your faith walk? Do you see as part of your work as a public moralist? How do you see those two things tying together? Because there are some folks saying, you're a theologian, you need to be worried about the Lord, not reparations.
Well, the Lord is worried about reparations too. Okay? So the reason why but my work as a public theologian is informs my work as a reparationist, because the reality is that, first of all, Jesus Christ is the liberator. Okay, and reparations is essential to the gospel. The gospel holds that we, because of sin, we have been separated from God, right? And the only person that can make that connection between us and bring us back and reconcile us back to God is Jesus. Jesus is our reparation. He repaired the breach between humanity and God. And so there's no way.
Some of them folk will say, well, his grace is sufficient. You don't need our check.
Listen.
When a black woman go, listen, I know. Go ahead.
The gospel deals with the body and the soul. Right. And so it's not enough. It's not enough just to say, oh yeah, be well. I hope you make it. No. No, we also got to deal with the felt needs of people, and where there's injustice, it needs to be taken care of. Absolutely remedied.
Wow, I like that. Good news to the poor, freeing the captive.
That's
we
right.
Talking all that stuff, that Luke stuff. I got you. So this becomes, that's Book of Luke, y'all, not Uncle Luke. Some of y'all ain't raised right. Now, let's talk about what the comprehensive reparation plan might look like. Yeah. Some cities have made formal apologies in the United States. Others want to dump money into communities. You said earlier it's not about a big check. So talk to me about what that is, what it actually is.
So, I mean, well, we are in a capitalistic society, which was built on the backs of our ancestors. Let me just say that. So it's not less than a check now, because we're just in a different point of history, right? Initially, when our ancestors were calling for this, they were calling for land, right, so that they can begin to build in their own have their own self-sufficiency, self-determination, all of that, which we want too. But now that we are in this capitalistic society, we also do need a check as well. But reparations also has to include restitution, compensation, rehabilitation, satisfaction, cessation. Now, I think the last point is the most important, which is assurances of and guarantees of non-repetition. We have to have a guarantee that what has occurred in the past is not going to occur again.
And so not by any other means, because what they'll say is, oh, we'll never enslave you again. Yet we got more than 2 million people incarcerated right now. We have exploitation of labor through other means. So we got to really have a complicated conversation about this. We're going to have you back to keep this conversation going because it's so nuanced that we could never do it in one episode. Ekemini Uwan, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, make sure you check out her book. It's called Truth's Table, Black Women's Musings on Life, Love, and Liberation. You can get it wherever books are sold. But of course, we always want you to support Black bookstores. Stay right here, though, because still ahead on the Grio, we are spotlighting a new up-and-coming artist who puts Afro beats at the center of her music. But first, Africa played a huge part in the World Cup this year. What this win means for representation in British football.